As the finance minister lays out the government's economic roadmap in Budget 2026, the capital intensive industries are watching closely. With me to decode the impact is Subhrakant Panda, past president FICCI and managing director Indian Metals and Ferro Alloys Limited. Good to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Let me start with the first question that, from the perspective of core industries like mining and metals, what is your overall assessment of this year's budget? Does it meaningfully strengthen India's industrial and infrastructure backbone?
So I think this is a budget which I welcome because the core principles of financial stability, of growth, sustained growth, of fiscal prudence and moderate inflation is something that has been given a lot of importance. And added to that, the fifth element, which is access to resources and opportunities for all sections of society so that growth is inclusive. Specifically as far as core sectors are concerned, I think the biggest point is something which applies to the budget in general, which is credibility, because the finance minister has over the years stuck to her commitment of the fiscal glide path, with the deficit coming down to 4.4% for FY26 and projected to go down to 4.3% for FY27. So therefore, when she continues on the path of a higher allocation for infrastructure, which in turn has a multiplier effect across several sectors, it is a allocation which is made, which has the which is credible, if I can put it that way. Now, specifically as far as manufacturing is concerned, there are a lot of announcements in there which are noteworthy. Specifically, I think the rare earth mineral corridor for Odisha and other states, as well as the inland waterway projects, starting out again with 5 projects in Odisha. This is very important from a logistics cost point of view, as well as reducing the burden on the road transportation, etc. And then specific sectors in manufacturing, looking at container manufacturing. If you look at broader picture, the continuation of the semiconductor mission. So yes, there is plenty of heft in this budget, and it is something which prioritizes growth without compromising on fiscal prudence.
Let me pick up this rare earth bit. You are based out of Odisha, although I'm not very sure if you are already a player in the rare earth parts or not. But as someone who is in the metals and the mining part of it, how encouraged are you with such announcements?
Very encouraged. So you're right, we're in the metals and mining space. We are closely evaluating investments in rare earths, because that is something which is, pun intended, critical, and which has significant connotations for India's growth ambitions. And in this context, I would look at not just this budget, but what the government has done even leading up to it. So you have had the PLI scheme for rare earth permanent magnets. You have had outlays to encourage more exploration, to recover tailings, etc. So there is a lot which has been done for rare earth elements and critical minerals even prior to this budget. And of course, the announcement of the rare earth mineral corridor, which will prioritize everything from exploration to processing, I think just underscores the laser sharp focus of the government on on making a comprehensive policy which will in times to come reduce India's dependence on imports and outside technology.
Right. I think especially this rare earth part is very, very critical, like you mentioned, because of the grip China has on it. And just moving a little bit more, what are the misses, if you can, if you can elucidate on that? What more would you have liked the FM to do?
So look, I mean, I always prefer to focus on the positives, because I think it's fair to say that everybody always wants more. But at the end of the day, there are competing demands, and even at a fairly large level as the fourth largest economy in the world, nevertheless resources are finite, right? So balancing those competing demands and ensuring that there are adequate outlays for health, education, defense, etc. And while there weren't specific references in her speech, but I do understand that defense, for example, has had a high double digits sort of increase in allocation for procurement as well as modernization. There are competing demands. Now, specifically what more could have been done. For example, FICCI had a recommendation that we should look at an electronics park which brings together component makers and various other players of encompassing the entire supply chain. Now, that may not be there in the budget, but what is there is a significant outlay for the electronics sector, outlays for the semiconductor mission, as I said. So, all said and done, I would look more at the positives and say that governance and policy making is not just on one day, which is the 1st of February, but it is something that this government has demonstrated is a 365-day exercise. So I'm sure that if there are any gaps which need to be plugged, you won't have to wait until the next budget.
Let's look at the cost structure conversation. Manufacturing depends, to a great extent on input costs like power, logistics, cost of raw material. Does this budget do enough to meaningfully lower the cost of manufacturing in India?
So look, I think competitiveness is a very important part because as we grow in size as an economy, it is also important for us, even as we have a strong focus on the domestic market, to not take our eye off the export market, that we want to be, in a manner of speaking, the factory of the world. And therefore, it is important to focus on both competitiveness as well as quality. Now, I think specifically the proposal for inland waterways will have a positive impact on the logistics cost. But if I were to answer your question from a slightly broader perspective and look at structural reforms, I think while the government has done a lot, again in the preceding several years, on decriminalizing minor offences, on doing away with outdated rules and regulations, I think the time has come to move on to structural reforms. A step has been taken in that regard with the labour codes being notified, which come into play. But other factor market reforms relating to land, relating to electricity, for example, relating to capital markets. Now, again, you have had some announcement. One needs to look into the fine print with regard to the corporate bond market, etc. There were references in the finance minister's speech. But specifically, to answer your question from a competitiveness perspective, I believe we must keep up the thrust on electricity sector reforms and look at reducing the cross subsidy burden that is there on industry.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 70% of your products are exported, and I'm looking at now policy buffers against global headwinds. We did hear the FM talk about the customs part of it. One demand that we constantly kept hearing in our pre-budget conversation was that there should be greater movement when it comes to custom duties and the Customs Act itself. The FM talked about something like a trusted exporter. Do you think whatever has been announced, it does enough to keep you excited in the exports game?
So, quick correction, we are currently about 95% exports actually, but with our expanded capacity, by the end of this year, we will be catering a little bit more to the domestic market, and we will perhaps come down to that 70% number that you were mentioning.
Okay.
Now, that being said, when you were asking the question, I thought you were heading a little bit towards what can be done to boost exports, but then keep in mind
if you want to add to
that leading up to the budget again, and that's the point I was making, that let's not look at policy making and as only a single day exercise. So leading up to the budget, there have been announcements about encouraging exports, about having an export mission, and significant outlays in this regard. So not everything needs to be in the budget itself. But what is there in the budget, I find quite interesting and supportive. The trusted importer aspect and all of that. Besides the move to sort of ease the interface with the authorities when you're importing specified goods and all of that. So I think the intent is there. A significant start has been made, and this is something that will gather momentum going ahead. And she did, in her speech, make specific references to changes which would be brought about in sort of, as I said, smoothening that interface and making it more trust based. And I think that's the way to go.
More trust based. Ease of doing business. Do you think a little bit more could have been done, especially when it comes to manufacturing?
So a lot has been done on ease of doing business, and not just in this budget or in the last 12 or 18 months, but I think this has, since COVID times, which the Honorable Prime Minister referred to as opportunity in adversity. I think a lot has been done in terms of the Jan Vishwas bill, getting rid of outdated rules and regulations, decriminalizing minor offences, bringing about lots of other measures which improve ease of doing business. And again, I would make that point that let's not look to just the budget as being the one-stop shop for governance. There are plenty of steps which have been taken leading up to the budget, which have improved the ease of doing business in India and brought down the cost of doing business in India. And while the budget is a very important policy statement and lays out the government's vision for not just the year ahead, but in many cases beyond that as well, with certain schemes having outlays for 5 years, etc. But I'm sure and I know that various ministries are hard at work, and the finance minister did talk about the several high-level committees
right,
headed by the former cabinet secretary, which are which is looking into what can be done, and I think this is a key area that the government has delivered and is focused on pushing it further.
right. Final question, do you see this budget as a directional upgrade for India's industrial and resource sectors? And how do you see global headwinds now playing a part?
So look, I mean, what is very clear is that globally there is a lot of turbulence. There are several things going on which bring about a lot of uncertainty. But where India stands out is not just as the world's fastest growing large economy, currently the 4th largest, but the fact that we have done tremendously well in terms of our macro numbers, in terms of where we find ourselves with regard to inflation, which is very much under control, including core inflation. So all those positives are there. But we don't exactly live in a vacuum, and therefore there is an interconnectedness with the world which leads to certain bumps along the way. But having said that, I think this is a budget which is focused on growth. This is a budget which is focused on inclusivity, and it is a budget which carries forward the sort of the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister of making India a developed nation, FICCI Bharat by 2047, and prioritizing Atmanirbharta or self-reliance, because I think that is a key factor given how we have seen policy changes by other nations having an impact globally. Self-reliance, of course, doesn't mean cutting off from the world, but it means that you do what you can to make sure that in key areas, in key sectors, that you stand with your head held high.
Right. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Panda.
Pleasure.
Your views and your opinions on what this budget looks like. Thank you so much.
Thank you.